Hey everybody, it's Mr. Loose, and your technique of the week is watercolor. So today, I'm just going to show you 6 very simple techniques for working with watercolor. For those of you who do not know what watercolor is, it is a type of paint that comes in this little case. Sometimes they come in tubes. And the paint is, when you touch it, it's like it's dry, it's tacky, it's not wet like other paints when you touch it. All right, and they usually come in these little cake things. That's what we call these pigments. And if I was to put my brush on it, nothing comes off. Okay, it's dry. So how do you use watercolor? Well, all you have to do is add some water. When you add the water to the watercolor, it will activate it and create the paint that you're going to use. So I'm going to show you how to use this magnificent art supplies. First, we're going to do what's called the dry brush. Now this is kind of tricky because dry brush, you would think, okay, well, it can't be wet. But since it's watercolor, we have to activate it. We have to wake it up. So you're going to get a little bit of water on your brush, okay? And you're going to put it in the paint, okay? But then what you're going to do is with your paper towel, you're going to kind of dry it off. But you still have a little bit of paint on there. And then you have this kind of dry, scratchy looking paint, okay? And that's when you have barely any water. And if it's sometimes too wet, you can also dry it off in your hand like that. And it's going to give you this dry, scratchy look, all right? And that's dry brush. It's when you have very, 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 very little water. You might have to get a little just to wake up the paint, but then with a paper towel or your hand, dry the brush off with the actual paint on it in your hand, and then paint. And this is going to give you a dry looking texture. It's great for looking like fur or sand or like a scratchy sweater or something. Next, we're going to do what is called a flat wash. And a flat wash is when you put some water on your color. You just paint a smooth, soft, solid. Okay, that's all. It's just smooth, solid, one coat, one solid color, right? It's flat wash. And the thing with watercolor is that unless you're doing a dry brush, you want to make sure that you keep your brush wet, all right? And the more water you use, the lighter your color is going to be. The more pigment and less water you use, or the more you layer it, the darker it'll be. And I'll show you that later. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something called wet on wet. And that is simply where you just get some water and you paint it on your paper. Okay, just put the water down. And then you get a color. I'm going to do orange. And you just put it on the wet water of the paper. And you can see how it's starting to kind of run around. So that's really cool. Okay, that's wet on wet. That's when you paint wet onto wet paper. All right. Now, before we do the other two, I'm going to go in. Actually, no, we're good. So now we're going to do gradient. Now, gradient, it's like I just told you. It's where you use more paint to make it darker and more water to make it lighter. So we're going to get our paint, and I'm going to make sure I get a lot of color on there, and I'm just going to paint a strip like that. Okay, and that's dark. So then what you're going to do, all right, so you just painted. You're going to dip your brush in the water, maybe like 2 times, don't swirl it around, and then you're going to paint again, right underneath it. It got a little bit lighter, didn't it? Now I'm going to add a little bit more water. Okay, it's slowly getting lighter. Add a little bit more water. All right, so it's slowly changing. So when I first started off, I got my brush wet and then I swirled it around in the pigment and then I went and painted. Then I put some water on my brush and then I painted again and it made it lighter. And I put my brush back in the water, painted again, and made it even lighter. And then when I added even more water, not adding any paint except for the first time, it slowly got lighter. And that's gradient. It's when it slowly gets lighter. And basically what I want you to learn here is just that using the same color, you can make all of these different colors just by having more or less water. Okay? Now, we're going to do one called Splatter. Everybody loves this one. So you're just going to get your paint, okay, and you can do one of two ways. You can either place it over your paper and then tap it with your pen or pencil, or what you can do is, if you don't mind getting a little dirty, you could put your fingers on the brush and then flick it like that. And that is how you create the splatter effect. All right, everybody loves that. And now, last but not least, the cloud effect. So for the cloud effect, I am going to create a flat wash like the first one we did. Okay, or I'm sorry, the second one we did, a flat wash. Okay, you don't have to do blue, that's just what I'm doing. Make sure you get it a little bit wet. And then you're going to get a paper towel or a tissue. You're going to crumple it up, and then you're just going to dab it. And what that does is it creates a cloud. Ooh, so you have the cloud effect. Okay, so it looks like little fluffy clouds. So those are our 6 watercolor techniques. I hope you guys have fun.